What's going on, everyone? Welcome to today's video. In this one, I want to highlight some JRPGs that get a lot of unnecessary hate, but actually deserve more love. I've got 10 games here that many people write off, but I genuinely think they're worth your time. With so many games out there vying for your attention, it's easy to overlook some of these games, especially when people have such bad things to say about them. I adore every title on this list and hope to convince you to give them a shot. Let me know in the comments below if you've played any of them. But without wasting any more of your time, let's jump right in. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a truly special game to me. Does it have a few issues here and there? Yes, perhaps, and we will get into those a little bit later, but this is by far one of the most impressive games on the Nintendo Switch, and it takes advantage of every single moment of your time. If you want a JRPG that you need to invest yourself wholeheartedly into, then this is the game for you. Now, there's one major issue I hear from people regarding this game, and it's the complexity of the combat and how the game teaches you its different systems. Now, I'll be honest, I can't defend this 100%. Its tutorials a bunch of random pop-ups telling you how to do certain things, but let's say, for example, you accidentally click out of it, and it's lost forever. There's no tutorial menu to go relearn something, and if any game in existence needs that, it's this one. Yes, the combat is complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it all flows so naturally and feels so perfect. Another major point of contention was the game's pacing and storytelling. While Xenoblade Chronicles 2 ultimately delivers an emotional and engaging narrative, it takes a significant amount of time to reach its most impactful moments. The early hours of the game introduce a wealth of complex mechanics and systems, often overwhelming new players with tutorials that continue for dozens of hours. I would get pop-ups with new tutorials, learning new things at the 40-hour mark in the game. Personally, though, I love this. I love a game that keeps me on my toes, constantly learning and being introduced to new ways to approach enemies and solve problems. JRPGs are long, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 does a great job at keeping things feeling fresh. Its world is vast and filled with incredible environments to explore, brought to life by one of the best soundtracks I have ever heard in a video game. The game's narrative, while slow to build, delivers emotional and memorable moments that resonated deeply with me and still has me theorizing and thinking about them to this day. Give this one a chance if you haven't yet. It's a truly special game. Next up, I have Final Fantasy XIII, and I could actually include the whole trilogy here. I think these are legitimately great games, but they are so widely considered to be genuinely bad for some reason. So let's dig into that a bit here. One of the most significant criticisms of Final Fantasy XIII was its linear structure. Unlike earlier Final Fantasy titles, which offered what seemed like expansive worlds to explore, Final Fantasy XIII funneled players through narrow corridor-like environments for the majority of the game. This design choice removed the sense of freedom and adventure players felt. While the game eventually opens up in the later sections, many players had already been turned off by the restrictive first half of the game. There's a classic sentiment with JRPGs that turns some people off, and it's the game really picks up once you're 20 to 30 hours in, and Final Fantasy XIII is often an example people point to for that. I would actually argue that the early parts of 13, however, are really important and focus a ton on character development and world building. I was heavily invested in everything surrounding the game that by the time things opened up, the pacing of everything felt so natural. I also adore the moment-to-moment gameplay and combat system. While initially limited, it evolved into a fast-paced and strategic experience that I really came to appreciate. The visuals and music were also really memorable, showcasing some of the most stunning environments and soundtracks in franchise history. At the time, and even today, this is one of the best-looking JRPGs out there. If you have been turned off by the conversation surrounding this game, then I urge you to go back and give it another try. The entire trilogy is really great. Modern Pokemon games are riddled with issues, but Pokemon Sword and Shield dug its hooks into me, and I really actually quite enjoyed the game. There was tons of hate going around with this one, the open areas that were heavily criticized, the graphics not being modern enough, the lack of innovation in the first new Pokemon game on the Switch. The list goes on, but I'm here to tell you why this game is actually super fun. Look, I don't think Pokemon needed to reinvent the wheel completely. Do they need to at this point? Yes, absolutely. Scarlet and Violet were rough, but that's a different road to walk down and a different topic for a different video altogether. At the time, this was the first Pokemon game on the Switch, and in my heart, I still just love the Pokemon concept and think it's a ton of fun. Sword and Shield had all of what makes Pokemon fun and addictive, but added in some cool things. The wild area, the game's first attempt at an open world space, was praised for its ambition but criticized for feeling barren and poorly optimized. Many fans expected a larger leap in graphical fidelity given the shift from handheld to console for the series, and Sword and Shield's visuals left many feeling underwhelmed. We all saw the tree memes. I mean, they were everywhere. I'm not a huge graphics snob, so this didn't bother me all that much, but Pokemon has a certain look and feel to it that honestly I actually genuinely enjoy. It's hard to put a finger on it, but I think the parts of Sword and Shield that I enjoyed most were the ones that felt somewhat nostalgic. Catching Pokemon, trading, battling, gym leaders, and the end game all felt familiar, and I was just enjoying playing it. I think Arceus and Scarlet and Violet really started to change things up and are taking steps in the right direction. We just haven't got there yet, and things with the series feel a little disjointed right now. Hopefully that changes with the new one that comes out soon, but if you like classic Pokemon, give these a try. You might just have some fun. Soul Hackers 2 gets a lot of hate, but I personally really love it. I'm an Atlas fan, so I'm really drawn to this gameplay style that these games showcase, and while Soul Hackers 2 doesn't have the highs of a Persona or a Metaphor, it does have its own unique personality, and I really think it's one that not enough people have given a chance. One point of contention was the game's combat and demon fusion system. While Soul Hackers 2 retained some core elements of the Shin Megami Tensei battle mechanics, it simplified many of its aspects. While some players really appreciated the more streamlined approach, others felt it lacked the strategic depth that made SMT games so engaging. Additionally, the demon recruitment and fusion system was noticeably less complex compared to previous Atlas titles, leading some fans to feel that the game was just a little more watered down in terms of customization and party building. However, what is here stands on its own as something truly unique and fun. When you step away from comparing this game to a bunch of other games, it's actually very good. This is the issue that I think we run into with many games like this. They get compared closely to other games, and when they don't stack up or exceed those, they're written off. But I have an outlook, especially when it comes to JRPGs, that I go in with the main objective of just seeing what this game has to offer, and can it do something interesting and fun to reel me in. And I feel like Soul Hackers 2 does this with its characters, story, and overall just really unique setting. This is a fun game that I think more people should try, and if you haven't had a chance to yet, then you definitely should. Next on the list, I have Final Fantasy XVI, a game that has sparked debate since its release. Many criticize it for straying from the classic Final Fantasy formula, but I'd argue that no game in the series is meant to feel exactly like the ones before it. See, I love that Final Fantasy is a series that really experiments with different gameplay styles and storytelling techniques, and Final Fantasy XVI is one of the best examples of Square Enix trying something completely different. One of the most notable aspects of Final Fantasy XVI was that the game embraced a fully real-time action combat system. This shift made battles more fluid and dynamic, with Clive executing stylish combos, dodges, and counters. I personally thought the new combat system was a ton of fun, and the boss fights were these larger-than-life spectacles that I've never really seen before in a game. Another big issue people have is that it just didn't feel like Final Fantasy, and I do agree with that to a certain extent. They felt that it was missing some of the key game design elements that made it feel like a JRPG, and I can side with this a bit because from a RPG standpoint, Final Fantasy XVI feels like it leans heavily into the action game side of things. Despite these criticisms, Final Fantasy XVI excelled in storytelling and cinematic presentation. The game took a darker, more mature approach. Political intrigue, war, and moral dilemmas were central themes, and Clive's personal journey of revenge and redemption was emotionally compelling. The icon battles that I mentioned briefly before are these massive cinematic clashes between godlike summons and made for some of the most visually spectacular moments in the entire franchise's history. Ultimately, I really enjoyed the game, and I think for those that were put off by the new direction and the new combat system and just the whole change up of Final Fantasy in general, maybe just give it a shot because you might just really love this game. Many of you may have forgotten about Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus, but I did not. Many people hated this game, but for whatever reason, I really enjoyed my time with it. Sure, it's not really the Final Fantasy spinoff we all look back on fondly, but I had a ton of fun with it and remember it very well. This game had the difficult task of expanding upon the legendary world of Final Fantasy while also experimenting with a new gameplay genre entirely. Released in 2006 for the PlayStation 2, it shifted away from traditional JRPG mechanics in favor of third-person shooter gameplay, with Vincent Valentine as the protagonist. While the game was praised for its ambition and its attempt to innovate within the Final Fantasy universe, it ultimately received mixed reactions due to its awkward mechanics, among a few other things. On the narrative side, Dirge of Cerberus attempted to expand upon Vincent Valentine's backstory, delving deep into his past with the Shinra Corporation and his connection to the secretive organization. While some fans, myself included, appreciated the added lore, others felt that the story was just overly convoluted, introducing new villains and concepts that did not seamlessly fit in with the overall universe. I actually thought this was super interesting, and I enjoyed seeing the different direction that it went in. If you like Final Fantasy and you like the whole, Final Fantasy VII universe and lore, and just want to see as much of it as possible, you might actually really have a ton of fun with this one. It is definitely a change up. It is something weird and unique, and I love old school games that veer off the beaten path to do something odd, because those are the ones that kind of stand out in my memory. So give this one a shot if you haven't yet. There's something about Eternights that really clicked with me. The setting, the characters, the gameplay all borrowed elements from some of my favorite games and created this game that I became just heavily invested in. Eternights doesn't overstay its welcome, and if you give it a chance, it might just wrap you up in its story. Eternights is a unique blend of action and dating simulation. Set in a world ravaged by a mysterious virus that turns people into these monstrous creatures, the game follows this protagonist who must navigate both the chaos of this new world and the relationships with other survivors. Eternights garnered attention for its intriguing premise, colorful characters, and its gameplay mechanics that resembled the likes of Persona. It faced a mixed reception. Some claimed it had uneven gameplay and a lack of polish, but this was an indie game by a small studio, and what they brought us was quite interesting. Despite all this, Eternights found a loyal fan base, including myself, who appreciated its unique take on combining different gameplay elements. The relationships were often seen as heartfelt, with several characters that stood out as memorable, and the world, despite its sparse environments, held potential with its intriguing premise of a post-apocalyptic landscape. The combat was challenging, and once I mastered it, it was super rewarding. The blend of real-time combat and social simulation, though imperfect, provided a refreshing twist on both genres that kept things from feeling repetitive as the game progressed. Overall, Eternights is a game with a lot of heart. For anyone seeking something different, Eternights offers a quirky and emotional adventure. Give this one a try. It's not that long of a game, and if you really like Persona and some of the mechanics those games have to offer, then I really think you'll probably enjoy this one. Bravely Default 2 is a classic JRPG in a modern landscape, for better or worse. It really takes all the things we love about the classics and expands on them without reinventing the wheel. I personally love it for that, but I think it received a lot of criticism for not innovating. Many people also weren't too fond of the art direction. It grew on me over time, but admittedly, it did take a while for me to appreciate what was there. One of the strongest aspects of Bravely Default 2 was its refined combat system, which continued the franchise's unique Brave and Default mechanics, which are honestly some of the best turn-based mechanics out there. The Brave system allows you to take multiple actions in a single turn by sacrificing future turns, and the Default mechanic lets you defend to stock up turns for more powerful moves. This system created a satisfying strategic layer to battles, rewarding you for balancing risk and reward. The game also features one of the best job and class systems out there. There are a large variety of job classes, each with their own unique abilities, providing ample opportunities for customization and experimentation. For me personally, the battle system remained one of the highlights, offering deep, tactical combat and kept the gameplay engaging. One of the major issues people brought up were the game's pacing and difficulty spikes. Bravely Default 2 had a tendency to stretch out certain sections, making them feel needlessly drawn out, especially when it came to the game's dungeons. The frequent backtracking was admittedly rough, but the game's combat system more than made up for it. Additionally, the game's difficulty curve was unpredictable, with some sections feeling a little bit too easy and others requiring hours of grinding to overcome. I personally love grinding in JRPGs, and so this was not an issue for me, but I can understand the criticism for some. I think, like much of this list, all this comes down to personal taste. What you like, what you don't like. I mean, if you like JRPG classics and want some slight modernizations to the more deep rooted stuff, then Bravely Default 2 will definitely scratch that itch, and I think you'll have a ton of fun with it. Reynatus is an interesting game. See, the demo came out and I made a video reflecting on my impressions of it, and those impressions were pretty positive. See, this is one where I think I was actually wrong about the overall reception of the game because I didn't expect it to get the bashing that it did. I was a fan of the moment-to-moment gameplay. The combat is fast-paced, and mechanically it reminds me of some of the PS2 era action games we had back in the day. For some, this might be a bad thing, and it was heavily criticized for feeling a bit dated, but for me, I really liked it. My expectations were never through the roof for Reynatus, but my interest has always been there since it was announced. The combat is fast, fluid, and flashy with a system that seems to work really well and requires you to think ahead a bit instead of just mashing buttons. By properly utilizing suppressed and liberated states, you can really put together some great combat sequences that feel good to execute. Look, is Reynatus the best action JRPG out there? No, but there are a ton of reviews out there giving it like 2s and 3s. There's long threads online about how terrible it is in every conceivable way, and I just don't see it. Shout out to Just the Gems for shining some light on this one because I might not have given it a try if it wasn't for him. If you want a more in-depth analysis of what I thought of the moment-to-moment gameplay, be sure to go check out my kind of first impressions of the demo. I go into a lot more detail of what I thought about the game. The demo itself is still out there, so just give it a shot, see if you like it. It may not be as bad as everyone thinks it is. Code Vein garnered a fair amount of negative attention, particularly for being frequently compared to Dark Souls. I think this was before all the Souls-like games came around and this became a genre of its own. I could be wrong about the timing of all that, and while it's true that Code Vein shares some similarities with Dark Souls in terms of things like combat difficulty and the way it presents RPG mechanics, this game offers a unique experience that deserves more appreciation than the criticism suggests. First, the game's narrative and world building are often overlooked. Code Vein is set in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity has been nearly destroyed by an event known as the Great Collapse. The story unfolds in a way that blends traditional JRPG elements with a more dark, gothic atmosphere. While some critics felt the narrative was predictable, it is nonetheless engaging with emotionally complex characters and deep lore that's gradually revealed through exploration and dialogue as the game progresses. The focus on narrative-driven character relationships and a more front-facing story set it apart from the more solitary approach that you get from Dark Souls games. The game's visual style is a vibrant and more anime-inspired aesthetic, and this has been called out quite a bit, but I actually loved that aspect of the game. I know it's all personal taste, but if you like that kind of art style, then Code Vein will appeal to you for sure. Code Vein might not push the boundaries of innovation in the same way other titles do, but it succeeds in offering a balanced experience that blends challenging combat with emotional storytelling, a dynamic that should be appreciated rather than dismissed. I really enjoyed my time with this one, and if you like action-based JRPGs, then definitely give it a try. Anyway, that's it from me in this one. This is my list of games that I feel get a bit too much hate out there. These are quickly dismissed and not given a fair shake in my opinion. I would really be interested to learn which games you think deserve more credit, and what do you think of the games on this list? Do you feel the harsh criticism is warranted? I look forward to reading all your thoughts, and until next time, I'm out.